different than ferrets. My name is Seanada Cvrk-surviving. I came from Lansing, Michigan. I am from Bosnia. Actually, I'm from Srebrenica. I'm going to be talking tonight about my experience during the war. Some of experience. I can't bring myself to say that I am happy to be here tonight for this particular reason. I would much rather speak of beautiful things without mentioning the dark, painful past. Unfortunately, this is reality. A reality which forces us to ensure that past occurrences are not forgotten. A reality which implores us to save the dignity of the victims of war, one that demands us to speak of it, to spread word about the genocide that took place, and to serve as a lesson for future generations. I'm a child of Srebrenica. War was the thief who stole the most important part of my life, my youth and teenager years. I'm a child who looked forward to life and enjoyed every second of beauty, up until the moment that the enemy entered my home and left it in flames. With that one action, they destroyed my childhood. All of the pictures of my entire life burned right before my eyes. They brought fear into my soul, as uncertainty into my heart. I was never taught to live in poverty. I didn't know what it meant not to achieve the desired. I didn't know what it meant to be hungry and to lose hope of food on the table. And I most certainly could not imagine that I would have to run from that which was embodied in the bursts of machine guns, or that I would have to hide from a storm of grenades in a battle for dear life. A battle. 4 years of burning homes, injury, blood, shootings, hunger, fear, insomnia, tears, survival. I grew up rough, maturing before my time, learning about life too early, hoping for the survival of my friends, my family, my acquaintances, strangers, and myself. I prayed to God. God was the only salvation for all of us. He saved my mother from certain death on the afternoon that she was wounded in the arm as she sat in her home, while the sniper aimed through the window. Her arm was destroyed, but she survived. Later that day, I gathered the bones from her fingers and the skin off of the walls and the floors of the room in which she was located, and they injured her. And I was grateful to God. I could have, instead of that skin and those bones, been collecting the rest of my mother's body, her dead body. I was happy that she survived certain death. I also remember the day that I received a kilogram of white flour from a friend after many months, and how I kneaded the dough for bread with such joy in my heart, with the hope that we would finally taste a real bite. In the fervor of the moments of carefully mixing the dough, making sure to save every particle of flour, a grenade fell onto the top floor of our house. Shrapnel fell all around me, and the house began to crumble. I ran out in the direction of the next house so as to hide in the safe basement, but believe me when I tell you, I did not let go of the bowl in which I was kneading the dough. I was the only hope that my family and I had for eating after a very long time, and I could not, even for the sake of my life, risk losing that chance. I saved the bread, I saved myself, and I pleased our stomachs with soft, smooth bites, which slid easily down our scratched, wounded throats, which had been damaged by the corn cob that we constantly ate in place of bread. There were many days during the period, but sad days. But one of the worst was the day that my best school friend, Senada Cvrk-surviving, stepped on a mine as he was walking with his friends from one village to the next. The news reached me in flesh. I sat frozen for hours on the threshold of my house, sobbing in pain. We didn't know if Senada was alive or not, since the Chetniks took his body from the location of the disaster, while the rest of his friends managed to get out. Some of them were injured, but were successful in surviving. The pain that I felt upon losing my best friend was indescribably strong and sharp. I couldn't feel the time that can never be brought back, nor did I notice the shooting and grenades around me. Everything became insignificant. The point of life and the battle for mere survival were dying with me. A part of me disappeared with him, and he was never, and has never, came back. I felt empty and defeated. God had stopped paying attention to my prayers. He was taken away from me who was most dear to my heart. I remember that night 22 years later, as if it were yesterday. The night which showed me how a human can be stronger than anything in the world. How a person has to live even if he doesn't want to. And how a person has to accept an unwelcome fate. During the war in Srebrenica, we all lacked clothing as well. During the winters, we took apart old sweaters and knit new ones, or gloves, or hats, or scarves. I wanted to cast away my worries and black thoughts in order to better deal with the situation. So I sat by the window of my uncle's house in which we lived as refugees and knit. My mother taught me how. I knit something for everyone. It was most difficult when I think of the hat that I knit for my cousin, Azem Emišević, who everyone knew as a faca. I knit a hat for him from one of my mother's old black sweaters. He was a man whom I considered my older brother and who helped me survive the difficult moments of war. Our family tie was just another link of our love we felt for one another. When I gave the hat to Faca that morning before he went into battle, he looked at me with his warm eyes, full of love and gratefulness, and hugged me tightly and kissed me on my cheek. It felt as though he was saying goodbye. He left my embrace well and alive, but was brought back to my house dead later that evening. That day, my cousin Faca was killed by the enemy's bullet, and on his head, it was that hat that I knit from black yarn, covered in blood. God took another angel from my life, and in doing so struck pain once again into my heart. To this day, when I see someone wearing a black hat, I go back in time, and once again, with tears mourn the loss of my cousin Faca. Eso Mehmedović wounded in his leg. The bullet remained lodged in his tissue and resulted in thrombosis. His leg began to rot. He was only 25 years old. He was my brother's friend, and to me, he was a brother, a friend, and the epitome of good. He struggled with the pain for months, dying slowly. He was in a war hospital in a village, which was not very close to the village in which I lived with my family as a refugee. I visited him quite often, and whenever I had any food, I would leave some for him and take it to the hospital. Our last encounter was on the day of his surgery, the day that the doctor decided that Edo's leg needed to be removed immediately because the thrombosis was spreading and could take his life. His last wish was for me to find him a cigarette and to bring it to him before the doctors took over. He knew that I would turn the world upside down to fulfill his wish. And I did. I stole, for the first and last time in my life. My uncle had a few hidden cigarettes in his house, about which only I knew. I stole one and took it to Asa that morning, Finally, a glittering smile appeared on his face. He inhaled the smoke with such great satisfaction and apparent pleasure as I caressed his hair and stopped next to him on the ward hospital bed. He wanted me to go home, but I wanted to stay until the surgery was over. Nevertheless, I listened to him. The surgery began at exactly 2 p.m. A dull silence took over the village. We all knew what was coming. Asa's struggle had begun. We knew exactly when the doctor cut into Asa's leg, because his moans and shrieks of pain could be heard in the nearby villages. We all cried, my brother, my mother, my father, and the entire village. Grief was suffocating us. I felt that the worst was yet to come. 15 minutes later, Asa's shrieks stopped, and we received word that our Asa had succumbed. He did not survive. One more death, one more wound upon my heart, one more loss which will hurt forever and will never be recovered from. As the months, deaths, and losses accumulated, I started to lose my faith in God. It was harder and harder to carry on with the evil that was tightening its hold from every direction. There were approximately 40,000 people, residents and refugees from surrounding cities and villages in Srebrenica. People who were struggling to survive. Hunger and weakness, disease and infection, attacked unmercifully. We didn't have medication or the means to be helped by the doctors. The hospital filled with wounded, while doctors attempted to save innocent lives without adequate means to do so. At one point, they even had to cut off the leg of a young man using a saw. And prior to doing so, they got him drunk on homemade brandy, which served as anesthesia. A 3-year-old child died in the arms of his father from hunger in front of the Dutch battalion, which supposedly couldn't help. The enemies attacked it by all means. They wouldn't even allow humanitarian aid, which was in accordance to the terms of agreement, to come to us. They starved us. For months, we had no salt. We became ghosts of our own bodies. We became a concentration camp of death. My mother became weaker and weaker due to a lack of medication. Arthritis was taking over all the bones in her body, making her an invalid. She had a difficulty time walking. I took care of her as if she were my very own child. In the midst of pain, torture, hunger, and poverty, we lived to see that fatal July 1995. The news that Srebrenica had fallen and that we needed to leave our homes spread like black magic among the people. All capable men headed to the forest towards Tuzla, while women and children headed into the direction of Potocaj. We were told that the Serbs had opened up a corridor for our men through which they would safely pass to the territory of the Federation. And for women and children, they had provided buses and that nothing would happen to anyone. Of course, they were lying. My brother and father packed a few personal items, and we all hugged in front of the threshold of our home for the last time. My brother looked at me and said, "Sister, I don't know if we will ever see each other again, but remember that history repeats itself." I knew what he meant by that. My father